Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Leaders Studio. My name is Todd. I have the unique privilege of being able to talk to really interesting people on topics around leadership. And today, our topic is Everything Looks Fine Until It Isn't. And I'm here with my friend and colleague, Ilana Sprongl. And Ilana, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself because you're going to do it so much better than I will.
Okay, well, so I am Ilana Sprongl. I am a leadership coach. I am a systems thinker. I'm fascinated by change management and organizational structures, adult learning behaviors, and I love writing, and I write a lot about many different things.
Well, and that's sort of one of the things that brought us together today, isn't it? Is some of the things that you've written, specifically around organizational structures, and that's kind of what we're talking about. So let's dive in, shall we? Like everything looks fine until it isn't. What do we even mean? Why are we talking about this?
Well, I mean, I think I'm going to start off with a story. My Swiss cheese story that I mentioned earlier.
I like that one.
Okay, so essentially, there's a guy's name is James Reason. He's in safety science research. And he had a theory called the Swiss cheese model. And basically what it is if you have a piece of Swiss cheese, it's got some holes in it, right? You know, your nice little slice. But you can walk around those holes if you're, a little person walking on a piece of Swiss cheese. But then you take another piece and you layer it on top. And it's got holes. And you can walk around those holes too, because mostly they don't overlap. And you can still probably get from one side of the cheese to the other without falling in a hole. And then you put another one down. And it's the same thing again, where you're just walking around. But what happens when a piece of cheese aligns with the holes beneath it? They start to, sorry, my do not disturb did not function as proper.
That's okay.
But what happens is you start to find you can fall through holes. And at the end of the day, when you fall through that hole, it's never the responsibility of the person who's put the cheese down. It's the responsibility of the person who fell through the hole.
Yeah.
So really, that's what I'm writing about. It's we keep blaming the people who are impacted, and we really need to look at who caused these things to happen. And the paper that sort of spawned this is that conversation from why organizations are structured the way they are and the impact that has on everybody, not just leaders, not just middle management, not just the folks on the ground, the three layers that always get blamed when something goes wrong. It's something a lot more fundamental.
Something fundamental. So, and it's interesting because when you and I were talking before the camera went, the thing that popped into my head was that it felt like the organization was the important thing, but that's not quite it, is it? It's right. You said it was the legitimacy of the organization.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm jumping ahead. I'm not sure. Like but because I have fallen into those Swiss cheese holes, and I think a lot of us have, right? Many times. And the thing that I noticed is that there's, as the person who fell into the hole, there's an experience that goes along with that, and the experience is isolation and feeling like it's my fault. Right. If I had just done something better, if I had been a better change agent, if I had been, if I had created a better partnership with the sponsor, if like whatever, then none of this would have happened. Everything would have been fine, and it's all my fault. And what your paper gave me, like the gift of the paper, was, oh no, you know what? Actually, the system's designed to make it feel like that. Like that was by design. And that's I mean, it was good to hear. I will admit that it would have been better to hear 5 or 10 years ago.
Yeah, always. I would push back a little bit on the by design. I don't think people intentionally design organizations to hurt the people inside them. I think it's a series of organizational needs or perceived requirements that drive it. And it's that concept of legitimacy. right?
Mm-hmm.
Things need to look the same, right? So another example, or an example of that is banking and risk management structure. Is this investment risky or not? Now let's go back to the financial crisis of subprime mortgages, right?
Right.
All the banks were doing them in the States. And this is where I'm in Canada, so we had a little bit different impacts here. But in the States, it was a very popular thing to do, to the point where if you were in a small bank in the US, and for those of you who aren't aware, the banking structure in the US is made up of many, many small banks and a few very large players. And those many, many small banks all have their own boards, and they look to see what the other small banks are doing. And that's legitimacy. We should be doing what everybody else is doing. And the more people who do an activity, the more legitimate it seems. Subprime mortgage crisis occurs. I'm oversimplifying that a bit, but that's the impact of legitimacy when we're thinking about an organization. So in any organization, there is a typical structure, right? We have leadership, we have our board, we have our C-suite, we have leadership, we have middle management, and then we have folks who do the work.
Right.
I'm grossly overgeneralizing here. But our top layer is really is that board to business structure, right? We're going to do this way because everybody else does it this way. You know, you want to say a bank is structured like a bank is structured like a bank.
Right.
It kind of is. Sorry, banks as examples. I worked for a bank for a long time, so those are primary
Me
in
too.
my head. But manufacturing, same thing. There's only a certain number of ways you can do things. I think Toyota, when they came up with their lean kata, like they changed so much about manufacturing. But before then, everyone did it the exact same way. And even today, a lot of stuff is the same. There's just the ways you do things. We think of them as normal. The technical term is institutional isomorphism. I'm not going to get into that too deeply, but what happens is that structure leads to the next level being almost set in stone, right? And that's that intermediate leadership dashboarding thing where we start looking at what's going on and everything looks healthy. Well, I can walk across the floor, so I'm green because I can still walk around the holes, right? Until it all lines up in such a way that you're going to have to fall into a hole, right? But until that occurs, you're green, right? And then ouch.
The thing, exactly. And the thing that's popping up for me as you're describing that is you know, so I also worked in a bank and you know, in technology, and we were building, you know, internal technological sort of software essentially for use of the bank, and there was a very specific process that we needed to follow, and the specific development process that we needed to follow was extremely prescriptive because audit, regulation, all of that good stuff, and it didn't always fit with the things that needed to be built. And so this is one of the things that was interesting when I read your paper too, was you know, pockets of difference, pockets of workarounds, pockets of, you know, oh, I know that the process says that we're supposed to do this, but we're going to do this because it never works if we do it the way we're supposed to. And
that's
what I'm, go ahead.
I would say no, but it's a great point. It's like it's the myth of a formal structure. Everyone thinks we're operating the way we should be, but we're not. That's why dashboards are green and then projects fail and everybody's like, I didn't know what was coming, especially at the team level where they're just following the orders. And, you know, and this is where the injury piece comes in for folks who are doing work. They know it's going to fail, but they're not allowed to say anything. Or when they say it, it falls in deaf ears until it actually fails. And then they're held accountable for something that was, you know, totally out of their control, a decision made upstream or a structural thing. So there's nothing in our structure that says, here's how we can report this anomaly. And then there's nothing in what they can do to deal with it. Because at the end of the day, like the work that they're actually doing once we're in a large organization is no longer seen.
I hear you.
You know, again, there's lots of research on the topic, but the problem is the folks who are making the decisions no longer understand the complexity of the work, and that gap causes problems.
Well, so what's interesting to me, and I have this urge, Ilana, to sort of bring it into maybe things that we've got experience with. So let me try this, because I'm also making up that I think that you and I both have more than a little bit of experience in that space that maybe at one time was called agile transformation. I'm not sure if it's called quite the same thing anymore.
And it is still today.
And I think what's interesting to me is, like, when I hear you describe this, is there's an opportunity to build resiliency into that structure that often isn't built into that structure to account for the common failures around agile transformations, because there's lots and lots of experience, or lots of anecdotes that I have in my head anyway, of this organization wanted to be agile, but it ultimately failed, and the reason was fill in the blank. And what I'm hearing is the fill in the blank isn't the whole story in the way that maybe we want it to be.
Yeah, well, I think yes. So I have been part of several, successful to a certain degree. But I think the key is like the failures typically are assigned to people or roles, if not people explicitly. The leaders, they didn't change. They didn't explain it well enough. They weren't on board. Or the messy middle. The middle managers didn't want to change. We get that one all the time. Grassroots, absolutely everybody wants to change. They want to try to do something differently, right? And then we can't, because the organization isn't structured, and it doesn't have anything to do with the roles. It's got to do with the actual structure of the org and the processes within the org itself, again, to maintain that legitimacy, right? People, so as an example, I'm gonna pick on finance a little bit here, because I did some work with the Agile Business Consortium on actually a manifesto for agility in finance, which is on their site if you're curious about it. But there's a lot of constraints, and we're working on our next piece relevant to this conversation, because how can you change your financial reporting if your board is expecting, X and Y, if you're publicly traded, is expecting X and Y, if you're a nonprofit, the government and reporting agencies are expecting X and Y by a certain date or in a certain way. So how do you move to something like rolling budgets, or even, adopting something extreme like beyond budgeting in an organization that has all of these requirements? And it's not to say that you can't do it, but you can't do it and still meet organizational legitimacy expectations 100% of the time, which means organizations need to do more work to be able to help people understand what they're doing, why they're doing, and how they can do it. And organizations aren't structured to have that happen, because all of our rewards, shareholder value, et cetera, it's all based on the way we currently operate our organizations.
A bank is a bank is a bank is a bank.
Kind of.
Like,
or manufacturing or any other industry, there's there's the structure or the goal we all try to attain, right? That's how we know we're successful, because we're doing like X.
So okay, so I'm a change manager, and I, and I'm talking to an organization who wants to institute some kind of change, something important, and I don't want to get it wrong again, because it is harmful, because I feel something about myself when it happens. Like, are there practical things that I should be thinking of in that situation? Like, what are the questions that I should be asking, and how do I know when to say yes and when to say no?
Wow, that's a lot of questions. That's not actually covered.
Which one do you want to answer?
My research. Now, I will tell you, I'm working on a book that's going to cover some of this. It's not out yet,
awesome.
but I think the answer, sort of in a nutshell, although like I do, some of my other papers have diagnostics and things in them that help understand things like barriers to executive learning. There are a little bit of the same barriers here. Why can't we do it? Because the system isn't letting us demonstrate that we've learned. So I think there's some stuff in there. But if you're hired into an organization, and you just can't make it work. Your best practices are failing and you don't know what to do next. Look at what's blocking you, not the people, the roles and process expectations. Again, not that you can change process A, because we can change whatever process we want, but what's expecting it, right? What are those end drivers? And then, because you're not going to be able to change them as a change manager, you're really not. You're not positioned well. Like, it's a board level decision for large organizations. All we can do is surface the relevant risks. Right? So how many agile transformations have struggled with people and culture or human resources to change compensation, to change performance targets, right?
Yep.
And those are just one piece of what is considered a legitimate organization. Now we have to change many pieces. So raising the risk is pretty much the only thing that you can do, in a position as change management, which doesn't mean that change management is a futile activity, because there's lots of changes that we can support in organizations that don't require a structural change.
Yeah.
But if we really want to make changes that reduce the risk to employees. I mean, and the term I use is moral injury. When people end up doing things that they're not comfortable doing because the organization expects it of them.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be a big thing. It could just be something as simple as being silent. Right? It hurts people. At the middle management level, it causes burnout. Right? Because you're being pushed by leaders to do one thing, support your teams, but then they're not giving you the tools to support them, and you have to report back up, what you've done, right? Those are
and then they don't want to hear
pressure,
it. Yeah.
right. And so you've got high pressure burnout situations in the middle. You've got these moral injuries at the base level, and at the senior level, they're also in that burnout because they've got accountability to the board, and the board has accountability to everyone else and to that concept of legitimacy.
Yep. And that's the interesting thing to me, because there's an organizational piece and an individual piece. And I think, when I think of sort of the way that I have structured it in my head prior to reading, your paper and prior to this conversation, I've often thought of it as an either or, right? Like, there is a systemic topic that needs to be addressed, or there is an individual topic that needs to be addressed. And it's both and. Because and I'll just, full disclosure, I'm more comfortable with the individual piece because that's the kind of coaching that I generally do. And when I think of the moral injury that you're describing, right, if we go back to the story again, the person who fell through the holes in the cheese and who was injured as a result of that, there's a, I'm going to use a word that I don't like using in this case, but there's a building of resiliency in that space. Like, it's almost sort of like, if I know that this is a possibility when I go into that, and I've done the due diligence, I've raised the risks, like you're talking about, I've done the things that I can do, and I fall into the hole, then what do I need to do? And I think that, like, this is a rhetorical question, possibly, what do I need to do, or what could I do, right, to make it so that I don't have to make that mine, so I don't have to own that having fallen in the hole.
Yeah, it's just recognizing that some of this is systemic, and there is no one individual who can impact the change. If you sort of go back to like Donella Meadows and systems thinking, and I know you've done a little bit of view in that, we can map a system. We can understand how it interacts with itself, but that doesn't mean that we can change it. And it's recognizing that, some pieces of some systems are self-reinforcing. And to change them requires an outside force. And that means that as practitioners, we can't always do everything ourselves.
Yeah. There's I want to acknowledge Sudeep, who is in our comments and who's had an awful lot to say. So thank you, Sudeep, because we see you. One of the things that I want to call out that you've mentioned here, and I'm bringing it up on the screen, is this one. Is that it's okay to ask for help. And I got to tell you, I think, when I think of the kinds of places where that moral injury can happen, if I had this little piece of wisdom in my head it's okay to ask for help. I think that I probably would have experienced a less intense version of the harm. Um,
Mhm.
and I wonder if that's consistent with some of the people that you work with as well. It this popped out for me like in bright relief. Thanks, Sadie.
Yeah, I think I'm going to say it depends.
Uh-huh.
I mean,
I mean, it always
but
does.
it really does. Like in some organizations, even the ability to ask for help is a negative signal for your continued employment
Yep.
at an organization.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really, to me, the flip side is if you ask for help and you get fired, it's probably a good thing for your long-term well-being, even if it
Mm-hmm.
seems very painful in the short term. And I know I'm
Mm-hmm.
seeming a little flip right now, but I think it's important to recognize that sometimes signals don't let you acknowledge the fact
Mm-hmm.
that you're drowning for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
And all you can do is, hopefully you have a buddy that you can hang on to.
Mm-hmm.
And generally in organizations like this, there's at least one or two other people who are in you know, skirting around the edge of the same hole that you're trying to
Right.
avoid, to go back to
Mm-hmm.
the Swiss cheese. Um, and maybe you'll catch a mouse and ride to safety, but
Right.
maybe you don't, right? And if all three of you fall in the hole together, you can support each other and help each other climb back out. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes that's the best you can do, because again, like when you're in a system, it's hard to see and it's hard to change. So
Mm-hmm.
like my goal with this paper was just to get people thinking about it, right?
Right.
Like, is there a different way to look at this, and how does all of this tie together?
Yeah. And I love this. And also I want to mention, because I probably should have done this before. The paper that we're referring to, Ilana, is your paper, which is no longer available in the show notes of this show. It is called Macro Patterns, Micro Fractures: How Legitimate Organizational Designs Produce Predictable Human Costs. And if you're interested in the paper,
Yeah.
the answer is to reach out to you.
It is. I recently
Yes.
submitted it to a journal, so I had to take it off of SSRN, where it's been available for
Okay.
a couple of months now. But I'm
Mhm.
I'm happy to share it if someone reaches out and wants to get a copy, for sure.
And I really, really recommend it. It's huge. It's a really big deal. I enjoyed it a lot. Sorry, I feel like I derailed. I have one more question that I kind of want to ask, right? Because we
Okay.
like in that we talked a little bit about, okay, so I'm an individual, a change management person, a change agent, whatever, like in that change space, what are the things that I need to do? And you talked about risk. What if I'm much higher up in the organization? What if I'm C-suite? What if I have
Mhm.
a feeling that I think that there's a change that needs to happen, and
Yeah.
I want to sponsor it, and I actually want to be a good sponsor of this
Hmm.
change. What are some things that I ought to be thinking about that probably I'm not thinking about?
Well, the systems that are running inside your organization and what they
Mm-hmm.
mean, like the signals they send. Um, I have in another one of my papers a series of diagnostics. And again, it's related to
Mm-hmm.
executive learning, but they help you understand what might be going on based on
Mm-hmm.
activities that you're seeing occur.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's very, very hard to see a system when you're inside of it, even as an executive leader.
Yes.
If you're new to the org, it's
Mm-hmm.
easier to see.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're a senior leader who's been, at the organization for a while, it becomes common practice.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, you don't see it because that's
Yeah.
just how things are done, right?
Yeah.
But the key is to, well, why are we doing things this way? What's the true driver? What's the outcome that we were trying to achieve when we set this up?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And was it really mindful when we set it up this way? Or did we do
Right.
it because that's how it's supposed to be done and we didn't look at
Mm-hmm.
it, right? Best practices, which are, in my opinion, actually not, um, are
Mm-hmm.
based on certain structures,
Mm-hmm.
right? Your best practice for whatever will only work if your situation is the exact same as the other best practice.
Mm-hmm.
So those folks who make money creating best practices, also
Yeah.
work to ensure that your structures are aligned enough that they're going to work everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, and
Yep.
again, not naming organizations here who have done
Of
this,
course.
but everybody does because it
Yeah.
makes things easier and
Mm-hmm.
explainable.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't make them right, and it doesn't make you effective as an organization, and it
Mm-hmm.
certainly doesn't help you support your teams at the end of the day.
So the takeaway that I'm hearing from this is ask why. Like
Always
really ask
curiosity.
why. Like
In
exactly.
everything, curiosity.
Yeah. What is this all about? That's and to be honest, like I think I love that that's sort of where this is landing because curiosity is a superpower, and I genuinely believe that. And what I love about what you're saying is that it's a superpower organizationally, not just personally.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Ilana, it's I'm looking at the time and we're almost at the end of this.
Wow.
I
Kind of
actually, yeah, I
fast.
know, right? It went fast. I could keep talking to you for a long time. And maybe we should do this again sometime. But listen, before we say goodbye, is there like what do you want folks who are listening to this to walk away from this with? What's important?
Understand that blaming people will never solve system problems.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, to me, that's sort of the bottom line. Our
Mm-hmm.
organizational structures and systems cause more problems than people ever will, but people are
Wow.
easier to blame. Don't blame the people.
But people are easier to blame. That's a mic drop. That is. I like that. I feel that one in my soul. So yeah, I hear you. Lana, thank you. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. I mean, I really appreciate you.
You too. Yeah, loving this. This was a terrific conversation. Thank you for inviting me to speak.
Anytime at all. Listen, the folks that are watching and listening, if they want to get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Via LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
Just drop me a note. If you want to chat with me, my profile actually has a meeting booking link. So you can just go and book 30 minutes to chat. I'm open for that as well.
Fantastic. That's really good to know. Thank you so much. And folks, you know me, I'm Todd Cargus. You can reach me at toddcargus.com or at beinghumanleaders.com. And that's a wrap for today. Thank you. This has been
Thank you again,
this
Todd.
has
And
been a
thank you
delight.
everyone for tuning
Yeah,
in. This
and
has been great.
indeed. And thank you, thank you everyone for tuning in and for the input. All right, so we'll end it there and see you next time.
Yeah, sounds good.